Greetings ladies and mental gents, and welcome to my channel, where I like to make audio narrations of various stories from the internet. In this video, we will be focusing on a story from the subreddit HFY, called Food for Thought 11, Marine Shaken, Not Stirred, written by Level 25 Human Nerd. The link to the original story will be in the description down below. And, as always, I hope that you enjoy. Rule 33. Cavalry doesn't always come to the rescue. Rule 51. Don't ever be the first. Don't ever be the last. Don't ever volunteer for anything. Private J.D. Murphy, attributed. There's a lot that goes through a person's mind during a hot drop. How far until planetfall? How thick is the atmosphere? Will the drop pod hold? Alex only had to worry about two of these things. He wasn't in a proper drop pod, so hull integrity wasn't a problem. The thin energy field surrounding his suit meant that any latent heat was being washed off as he fell. So he and his heavy plate shield was holding up, taking the brunt of the atmospheric resistance. The freefall wasn't the worst part. He couldn't help but see what was going on past the shield. He saw streaks in the corner of his vision, as the bombardment provided cover fire for his drop. Even with the inertial dampness on full, it was rough going. The planet's gravity was pulling him down like a loose anchor, and the atmosphere was doing everything it could to keep him from reaching the ground in one piece. The resistance pushed him off course slightly, so he flared the jump jets to maneuver back into position. Each HUD displayed the line checkpoints along his path, each one showing another 100 meters dropped. Soon enough, though, the muffled roar of the atmospheric fire faded into a howl of wind, and the external temperature indicator plummeted suddenly. Grabbing his rifle in his right hand, Alexander released the shield and let it fly off of his own, the jump pack flaring to position him face down into the drop. Warning, local gravity is 1.24 G, compensating thrust vector and output. Confirm. Confirm. The drop vector adjusted, and the thrust meter shrank a little. He'd have a shorter bursts to work with, but the output was increased to compensate for the extra weight. The suit inflated a little around him to put pressure on his limbs to avoid a blackout. Not that he felt they needed it much. He considered disabling the safeguard. He decided against it. This wasn't a training course. This wasn't a refresher drop. He couldn't afford to take the risks when it wasn't just his life on the line. Not yet, at least. Below him loomed the ochre-red hills of the Dustlands. Iron sweat filled his nose. Copper eyes glared through him, cracked and rust-stained hands clutched for his throat. Pilot, your vitals are spiking. Are you in distress? I'm fine, Alice. Just excited is all, he replied, blinking himself back to the present and focusing on his HUD. The ground flew towards him, filling more and more of his vision. He saw the smouldering remains of the shuttle below. A long divot curved out, and the dirt making its impromptu landing vector. Small points of darkness moved around the wreck, and soon each one had a red reticle around it, marking them as hostile. Well, so much for getting here ahead of the patrols. Alice, close combat protocols, set ALP to semi-auto. Another burst of the jet steered him towards the site, and it performed a half flip to get the taloned feet on the suit below him. Flaring the jump pack had to slow his descent. The human locked his target and shouldered the rifle. He didn't feel the kick as he pulled the trigger 4 times, each 15mm magnetically accelerated slug, leaving serving plate-sized holes in the unfortunate victims. Alex killed the jets and dropped the last 50 meters, landing in a cloud of dust. 3 more shots rang out. The dark red mist mingled with the ruddy sand in the air. Sensor sweep. The hostiles terminated. No further movement. The human turned in a slow arc, sweeping the area around him as the dust settled, the machine gun on his shoulder moving in a tight sweeps in the opposite direction. He trusted the AI sensors, but there was a comfort in doing checks yourself. Clear. Lucifer to throne. Arc secured. 7 tangos, all Sabari. No sign of survivors. He heard the ping and confirmation in his ear, and then he moved to check the wreck itself. There were clear signs of activity. Many of the emergency supply containers had been opened and emptied. There were no bodies, but there was evidence there had been. From the drag marks on the floor and the way that the hatchway of the cockpit had been torn open, it looked like one of the pilots had died and been pulled clear of the wreck. A lot of the tracks he had been hoping to find were ruined by the search party's scavenging. As Alex spread his search out, he eventually spotted the first clues confirming that the survivors had headed towards the hills, and now he knew which ones. After making sure that all his gear had survived the drop with him, the human set off with an onboard compass indicated that was 116 bearing. He fell into a steady jog, and he kept his eyes on the sensor feedback of his suit that was sending to his visor. The last thing that he needed was to be ambushed and end up as another casualty. Turris sat forward in his seat, his tail swaying back and forward in a slow, controlled arcs. The human ship stopped its barrage once the first report from the soldier had come in. The delivery shuttle had safely returned to the Blood of Many, and its first Allied kills had been delivered. It was a good omen as far as the shipmaster was concerned, and he offered a quiet prayer to the ancestors to thank them. Still, he was a seasoned soldier, and he knew how badly things could go wrong when one least expected. If he was getting his daughter back alive, he needed to trust the human, but he would remain vigilant as well. There was still much that he could do to help, and watching the battlefield closely was keeping him from dwelling too hard on the worst-case scenarios. It was when his communication specialist spoke up that he knew that a real fight was beginning. "Shipmaster, transmission from the human vessel." "Bring it up." The image of Captain Bendon phased into being in front of the shipmaster, the two sharing a nod of respectful greeting. "Shipmaster, we intercepted a transmission from the smuggler base. You're going to want to see this." Her image faded, and it was the place was the exiled leader. A low growl rolled up through Thuris's throat, and he stood. "Hold the transmission. Send it to my nest," he ordered, before slipping away to watch the message in the privacy of his quarters. Whatever the dishonorable mongrel had to say, he refused to let it reach the ears of his crew. Thuris sat cross-legged at his desk and tapped on the icon to play the waiting message. "Brothers and sisters of the Cyrusol, welcome, allies. Raise your eyes and behold, our honored brethren spit in the face of their own code. They bombard us from orbit like cowards instead of meeting us in the field of battle like true Sabari warriors. See now the hypocrisy I've spoken of. They claim to adhere to a code of honor, and this is what they chose to strike us with. We came to this world to seek a new life, free from oppression and the matriarchs, free from the shackles of the Kandra, to live as our ancestors did long ago. We were strong then, proud and unyielding. We lived by the rights of blood and blade. This is the narrow path that leads us from our birthright to the conquest and glory. Looks to the skies now, my brothers and sisters. Look to the skies and see the actions of Shipmaster Thuris, puppet of the brood Haston, he who has murdered his own brother, our brother, Jerahalanans, for no reason but greed and ambition. This is in the face of the enemy, the brute enforcer, that their precious Kandra. Here we are safe. Here their cowardice cannot harm us, and if they dare to try and push us from our home, they will suffer in a cold abyss as we feast on their bones. We are the chosen. We are the mighty. We are the clan of Cyrusol. Blood and blade. Thuris let out a slow hiss escape his nostrils, his throat rumbling dangerously as the message ended. Jehalal. He had hoped to never again hear that name of his fallen sibling, never again feel the grief and sorrow that gnawed at Thuris's heart from what he had to do. So your mind was poisoned, brother. Had I known, I would have sought out your redemption. He ran his claw over his chest and opened up a private line to the Shazarad. Captain Bendon, I thank you for bringing my attention to this. I would like to ask you any further transmission from the surface be blocked. I trust that you understand the danger of these words. Abigail agreed, and Thuris returned to the bridge. Lucifer, this is Throne. Come in. Only silence met his order. Lucifer, respond. Still nothing. The shipmaster's tail gave a flick, and he looked at the communications officer. The younger male shook his head, and Thuris sat down, marring his face. This was not good. There was standard troops on the ground, their individuals responsible for the revolutionary psychopath, and now the rescue soldier was out of contact. The video feed from the Shazarad still showed Alex moving quickly across the terrain, so that at the very least they could keep an eye on the human. Kandra guide you, Alexander, the shipmaster muttered, settling back into his seat. May you bask in the light and know not defeat. End of Part 11. If you enjoyed this story and wish to support the author, the link is down below. If you would like to support this channel, there are numerous ways to do so. They will also be listed in the description down below. But the easiest way to help this channel is to share it, subscribe, and like. And, as always, I will see you all in the next video, and I hope that you have a good one. Cheers!